When you hear the term electric vehicle, what do you think of? I'll bet probably most of the time for most of us, we think about cars, right? But actually, there are so many other things. We're going to talk about one of those in today's Wicked Problems. I'm talking with Guy Hayden from Aerovolt, a company that is a charge point operator for electric aircraft. There are several of these at the moment and more coming online soon. So it's quite an interesting discussion because I guess where we are with the industry is probably where we were with cars, electric cars, maybe 15 years ago. So it's going to be a really interesting story to watch unfold. And keep an eye out during this one because there's a great reference to a race, and this race will be in the show notes, between an electric car and electric vehicle featuring Richard Hammond and James May. So enjoy the episode. Guy, welcome to Wicked Problems. It's fantastic to have you on here again.
Hello, Toby, yeah.
I say again, but people watching or listening won't know that. But we did actually have a chat, didn't we, a little while back? But then we didn't get around to putting it out there because we were waiting for an event to happen. Maybe you want to tell us about that.
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago. I feel like it must have been, it was autumn last year. So that has been a long time ago. And at the time, we were planning the world's first electric car versus electric plane race. And I couldn't say much about it at the time because we were doing it in collaboration with Porsche. And they challenged us to a race with their nice new Taycan that's come out against our aircraft. And we ended up presenting that along with Richard Hammond and James May, who I'm sure you've heard of. And so it was the first time those two guys have worked together for a long time as well. So that was released, was it last month or was it the month before? I can't remember. I've been to sleep since then.
Only about 3 weeks ago, I think.
Really?
Yeah, so last month. And we'll put a link to it actually under this because it's a really fun watch.
The interesting thing about that was obviously, yes, it got how many millions of views it's up to now, but it was a very well supported thing in terms of obviously Richard Hammond, James May, big fan bases they've got, and people love the fact they were working together again. But also it was very positive for, I think, the EV industry more widely, and certainly electric aviation, because not a lot of people even know that electric aviation already has got to the stage that you can visibly kind of see in the video. So it was positive all round.
We'll come back on the electric aviation bit because obviously that's what you guys do. As you say, last time we spoke was sort of autumn last year, and I can't believe that things haven't changed in that space. So we'll come back and talk about that hopefully. Just on that race, I think what we'll probably do is to say we'll put a link below, and then people can watch it. It is good fun, and I'm not going to give anything away. But it was just very it was done really well, I thought, and let's just say James May enjoyed his breakfast.
He did, absolutely. Flying along with our CEO Phil, it was a really good day. We all enjoyed it, but I feel hopefully there might be a rematch on the cards one of the days. So let's see what we can do.
Tell me about Aerovolt. Tell the viewers and the listeners what an Aerovolt is. So we've alluded to it, but we haven't really described it as.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, I am Chief Commercial Officer for a company called Aerovolt, and we are building the world's first charging network, public charging network for electric aircraft. Currently, we're the only public charging network out there in the market. So we are kind of de facto leaders in the space. It's very early days for electric aviation, but what most people don't know is there already are electric aircraft flying, and a lot of others coming to market over the coming months and the coming years. Bigger, more capable things coming to market. So I quite often use the analogy. My background is, I think I did about eight and a half years in car charging in one form or another, and this feels like where the car charging industry was when that first Nissan Leaf, maybe even before that, maybe even when the G-Wiz came out. That's kind of a good comparison of where this industry is at the moment.
G-Wiz, now that's quite a long time ago, isn't it? I remember those. And I remember the first Tesla that I ever saw had actual batteries. Like, when I say actual batteries, obviously they've got actual batteries, but I mean like ones I could go and buy in a local supermarket.
Duracells, yeah.
And presumably, actually, since we last spoke, the technology's moved on, because one of the problems that I always thought there was with aircraft is when you're flying a traditional aircraft, you've got fuel. The weight of the aircraft changes as you fly, which extends the range as you lose the fuel. But with a battery, it's solid, right? You're not going to lose any weight, and so that can have an impact on range. But I wonder if I'm just making that up in my mind, or if that's actually a consideration, or whether things have been, the technology's improved so much that doesn't matter.
No, you are right. That's true. One of the limitations is definitely weight when it comes to batteries. However, if you look at the aircraft either now in the market, or those that are flight testing, or those that we will soon be able to buy, I mean, in the coming months, they don't have to have very large batteries, because different to a car, an aircraft doesn't have to necessarily be constantly pushed at the same rate. Once an aircraft takes off using a lot of power, when it's in kind of stable flight in decent weather conditions, the power utilization during that middle phase is not all that massive. So the range is an issue due to battery weight, but again, because of how the power is used, you can get usable range. And just to give you a feel for what that is in the real world, at the moment, Aerovolt we own and we use, and in fact a couple of flight schools use it as well, a Pipistrel Velis Electro that has a 20 kilowatt hour battery. So if you compare that to most car batteries, that's pretty small. And it does about 90 nautical miles of range there or thereabouts in decent weather conditions. So the flying time varies a little bit. But you can get up to, probably a good 50 minutes of usable flight time. So for some flight schools and things like that, you've already got a bit of an alternative. But the aircraft that are coming to market with slightly bigger batteries, but still, you're not at 100 or 100 plus kilowatt hour batteries like you have in cars now. The aircraft that are coming to market, the ranges are starting to increase by 40, 50% on top of that, and those coming in the coming years are even more so. So battery is absolutely a limitation, but there's ways around it, if you like, in the world of aircraft. And then on the battery tech side of things, of course, we're always seeing new battery chemistries being tested. Of course, they take a long time to come to market, particularly in the world of aviation, because they have to be certified to the nth degree, as you can imagine. But yeah, new battery chemistries with higher densities in the coming years, I think, will provide even more answers.
I was going to ask about that, because in the worlds of cars, you've got things like BYD coming out with the battery recently that can be charged in just 5 minutes from 20 to 80%, and various technologies or chemistries that mean that they're lighter, they can go further, they need fewer materials to be constructed, and so presumably aircraft can actually benefit from all of that advancement as well. There's no reason why they shouldn't, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the car industry is huge, and the world of light aircraft at the moment, compared to that, it's two completely different worlds. But absolutely, if you look at where the technologies come from that is being used in light aircraft and built into them, a lot of that development has come from the investments that have happened in the car charging industry. So absolutely, there's benefits to aircraft. The only difference is really certification. Anything that flies takes a long time to certify stuff, but it's a delay as opposed to a blocker.
Tell me a bit more about Aerovolt, because you are basically a charge point operator in the same way that many charge point operators exist for cars, but you're the only one, or the only one that I know of in the UK, and I'm assuming it is the only one. And are you at most of the airports, or most of the light aircraft airports throughout the UK? Is it a big network now that you've got? And what about other footprints elsewhere?
Where we're at, we have a very large pipeline now. It's actually, don't mind telling you, it's in excess of 300 airports globally now that we're either signed with or in good positive discussions with, if you count all of the pipeline. And we've engaged with even more than that. So the pipeline is very strong. We have a live network in the UK, and it's the only public network in the sense that if you, Toby, had a Pipistrel Velis, flew it into one of our sites now, you could charge, and you can either tap an Aerovolt card on there, or you can access it with the Octopus Electroverse as well. We're also interoperable with Octopus. So I do believe you can filter on the Octopus app by aircraft charging, which I think is quite interesting. So you can fly in, access our charger. Anybody can do that. And it, as you say, we are a CPO in the same way that a car charging CPO is. Our network in the UK, being completely honest, it's not huge at the minute. We've got 7 live sites across the south coast, a big pipeline all the way up to top of Scotland, and as I say, in some other geographies as well, which I'll keep to myself for the purposes of the conversation, but some very busy general aviation markets around the world. And frankly, we'd have a lot more in the ground if 2024 hadn't been the year that it was for fundraising. It's been a long journey with our fundraising, and it's all looking quite positive now. And I don't want to speak too soon, but hopefully within the next few weeks, we may have some good news on that front. So as and when that happens, it's just a matter of then we've got cash to continue realizing the pipeline that we built.
Well, that's exciting. So we can all keep an eye out for that, and I'll put a link to the Aerovolt website so that, and if anybody wants to click to it, and get the news, the latest news from you guys, they can, and see what's going on in that world, because I think it's fascinating. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, so if you're going to build out this big network, let's say I think you said 300 in the pipeline. So you talk about light aircraft, but I'm wondering if, it means that there's and you talk about new technologies and talked about new models of aircraft that are electric coming onto the market. Does that imply that there's going to be sort of slightly longer ranges of aircraft? So it's not just the light aircraft, maybe some of the small commercial type routes that we have in the UK?
Absolutely. And kind of to allude to the pipeline, yes, we've got small airports where it's essentially little 2-seaters, 4-seaters, lots of flight training goes on. That will be part of our network. We've equally signed quite a few actually now regional airports who do operate international flights. And in fact, our international pipeline also includes some very, very large international airports. And that's because their view of the future is they will be including either regional services, and there are electric aircraft being tested now, coming to market probably out towards 2030, realistically. But there's aircraft now being tested that will be applicable to the regional market. So we're absolutely getting chargers into those kind of sites. Equally, yes, it's a world that's very new and it is different, but eVTOL, so these electric vertical takeoff aircraft, often called air taxis, have other uses as well. But there's over 1,000 registered designs of those actually sat here today. And a number of them are flying, including some very close partners of ours who are flight testing various aircraft at the moment. So it'll be a mix of aircraft moving forward. At the moment, it's the art of the possible. It's 2-seaters, little training aircraft. Those are the aircraft that will be here in the next year, the next 2. But the future, there's certainly a lot of different aircraft we can be charging.
And that is going to really help with the whole decarbonisation and effort that's going on, because aircraft burn fuel. Things that burn fuel, put CO2 into the atmosphere, and things that don't. So,
I think that's true.
The same way.
There's another element with aviation though as well. So let's be fair. Decarbonisation of flight training is a small part of the aviation market when you compare it to international flights with hundreds of people on board, of which there's thousands that happen every day. It's a small part of the market, but it is a start. What equally though it does answer, which has always been a problem for aviation, is some of the practical concerns around like noise and aircraft movements. So noise has always been a problem for aircraft, and if you look at flight training and light aircraft in a lot of the airports around the country, that's their number one pain point. Their number one complaint is noise. As cities have grown and got closer to airports, noise has become even more of a problem. So electrification does also provide part of an answer to that, as well as, I referenced eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff. Now, these in the early days will be quite expensive, and I think most people would view them as, they're probably going to be providing services to a select bit of society to begin with. However, take London, for example. The London Heliport Centre, now that's a place that's very busy, so subscribed in fact, and they're restricted on their movements, so how many aircraft can go in and out. And the primary reasons for that are noise, which we've obviously mentioned, but also sustainability and decarbonisation, particularly over a big population centre like London. So the eVTOL aircraft start to provide answers to that as well. So yes, it's part of the wider decarbonisation piece, but equally, there's more aviation-specific problems it does provide some of the answers to.
That's a good point. I'd not considered the noise point, because you've got the noise. If you live near an airport, particularly a big airport, and I appreciate you're not going to be electrifying that tomorrow. The big 747s and so on that are coming in and out. That presumably, one would expect that the way that technology progresses, at some point, that is going to be possible, and that is going to really reduce the sort of noise that you hear on a Sunday afternoon when you're sitting out trying to have a nice chill and relax in the garden, and then suddenly a big noisy aircraft goes over, particularly if you live near. So there's that. Do they have an impact also on the? Because I think you said movement as well. Does it make the aircraft more stable in a way? So there's less vibration in the aircraft, like there is with cars.
It's not really that. I meant movements in a sense of pretty much any airport, heliport, whatever it be, nationally, internationally, they have a restricted number of aircraft that can land and take off during a period. It could be daily, could be weekly, could be monthly, could be yearly, right? But they are restricted. And if you've got aircraft flying that are more sustainable, i.e. there's less emissions directly over population centres, or if you have aircraft that are quieter and people are simply less irritated by them, then there's more of a movement answer. There's an argument to be made that we should be flying less. And I think in a globalized world with the economy that we're all part of, I think that's very, very difficult. Demand for flight is ever increasing. So yes, we should fly more considerately, I think. But the reality of the economy that we live in is decarbonisation needs to be the answer, and it is possible, but it's quite a long road. If you look at the larger aircraft, certainly there's some good answers potentially emerging, but it will take a long time, and it will take, frankly, people with much bigger brains than me to work out exactly how you're going to decarbonise, a 777 or something of that size.
Yeah, so presumably, because when you put a charge point operator goes and builds a site for a car, one of the things they have to contend with is, do the grid connections, are they good enough for being able to provide the electricity, the power to the charger? You mentioned earlier that the size of the battery is quite small at the moment. So I don't know if that means that your chargers are AC or if they're actually more like rapid and ultra rapid chargers, or becoming that way. You presumably have the same consideration, but you're also not. Quite often, airports aren't in a big residential place for the reasons that you stated. So does that make grid upgrades more difficult? And then I think the supplementary part to that question is, I have seen some. Instavolt have just built a facility in Winchester, which is powered a lot through solar, right? Which has meant that they can actually afford to drop the price to the consumer. Does solar have a part to play in being able to provide? Because if you haven't got planes on the stand every 2 minutes, presumably you've got time to, in a sense, trickle charge the charger itself, so that it's then or a battery that's connected to the charger, so that then when somebody comes and they've got a higher rating, that they can.
Whilst it's true in the light aircraft at the moment, the batteries are smaller, that will not remain the case. The batteries will get bigger, the aircraft will get bigger. If you look at electric vertical takeoff, because they take off vertically, they've got massive power demands with much bigger batteries. So we're going to have exactly the same problem as car charging. And I think actually in the future, our chargers will have to be even bigger than car charging networks. So power, the same as in the car charging world, is definitely an issue. The opportunity you've got, however, is airports tend to be pretty big, and they tend to have space to look at doing things to supplement power, such as solar, such as, I even know a couple of airports that have got wind farms attached to them and things. There's ways and means to supplement power, but absolutely grid will be a constraint, the same as it is in the car charging industry.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So, Anna, you're right. Airports have large roof spaces, and quite often at one end of the runway, there's not very much happening apart from planes turning around or whatever it is, right? So there's maybe, I don't know, because I don't know, that might be a safety no-no, but this may be an opportunity to put something down one end of the field or whatever it is. So I could absolutely see that.
They're the luxury of space to potentially do things, but there's cost attached to that, and it's not going to answer all of the future power demands, but it can be part of it. We've actually installed already one site at Dunkeswell where we've installed a 300 kilowatt hour battery system. So there we could only get a small single phase supply, and it wasn't big enough for what we needed. So we've installed a battery system in the middle, which essentially trickle charges from that small supply. And then if somebody comes and plugs their plane in, it dumps the power into the charger when it's needed.
Oh, nice. So effectively, what I was sort of outlining is happening already. And at that, sorry, what was the name of the site? I didn't.
It's Dunk as well. It's near Exeter. That was the first site we've done anything like that. There's a busy flight school there that have been really supportive of what we're doing and do operate the aircraft. So it made sense there to do everything we could to provide the charging.
And tell me, what are the you were talking about? There's been quite a lot of changes since since we last spoke in. So your order book's gone up, which I think you alluded to earlier. What else is happening in the world of both Aerovolt in particular, but also in electric aviation?
I think the key thing for us really is the fact that we're now at a stage within the next 12 to 18 months. There's some very interesting aircraft coming to market. A key one, and we've actually announced our partnership, so I can talk about it. A company called Bristol have an aircraft which they've worked with another company called H55, who've built the electric powertrain for it. And they're releasing an aircraft called the Bristol Energic, or Bristol H55 Energic. And that's an aircraft that is what's called fully CS23 compliant. And that means you can use that aircraft for flight training. And when that comes to market, that's key, because that means you can do things like go and get a pilot's license using one of those aircraft. And it also has higher range and the capability to do all of the requirements to do a private pilot's license. So that's quite interesting. And I will be learning to fly as well as soon as we close our funding round, in fact. So whilst with the current aircraft, I can only do what's called a light pilot's license, a LACL, I'll be able to upgrade that to a full private pilot's license, PPL, when that new aircraft comes to market, because of the increased capabilities, the increased range. And also interesting there is flight schools have started ordering that aircraft because it is certified, because it's CS23 compliant, and because of the capabilities it's got. So it's starting to be, we're at a stage now in the industry that there are real viable alternatives, and schools and flight training organizations are starting to seriously look at it.
One of the things we talked about last time, and I don't know if it's changed or not, but by the way, very exciting that you're going to do the training. I think I'm not jealous. Well, these eyes are not green. But one of the things we talked about before was whether helicopters are anywhere near being able to be electrified. And I think one of the problems was the sheer amount of power that those things need. But is that still the case? Are they not really in that state yet?
I'm not aware, sat here, of sort of a path to commercialize an electric helicopter. They're looking to reduce emissions, the engine's getting more efficient, etc., but I'm not currently aware of an electric helicopter that's coming. The closest comparison, I would refer back to those eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff aircraft, which, depending on what you're using your helicopter for, those could provide a viable alternative.
That's one of the reasons I asked, because you've got these vertical takeoff things, which is effectively what a helicopter is. And so that's what made me wonder, but I guess not at the moment.
Watch this space, I think. Watch this space. The fun thing about aviation, right? There's certainly some excellent technologies being developed. Which one will win out, I think, remains to be seen. Which companies will become dominant in the aircraft side, I think, remains to be seen. And frankly, everything is quite crystal ball. We know that electrification is a slow certainty. I use that phrase all the time, right? It's a certainty, because if you look at what the manufacturers are building and what flight schools want to be ordering, and what the future of regional transport looks like, and where money is being invested, it's electrification, right? But it's a question of how long that fully takes to come to market, to have a proper real world effect, and equally what the answers are to decarbonising the bigger stuff. It's crystal ball. And the only thing I'd say is I can give you my views now, but ask me again in 5 years, and pretty much it'll definitely be wrong, and I'll tell you something else.
Okay, well, look, one of the things another question that goes is partly the uptake of electric vehicles has been driven by things like the ZEV mandate and other government initiatives that either here or in other countries like Norway and across the EU and so on. What's driving the electrification of the airline industry? Is it just the desire by manufacturers to move to electrification, or are there other incentives that are driving that push?
I mean, it's different between markets. There's a bit of carrot and a bit of stick, frankly, the same as there is in most markets. But certainly, if you look at the world of jet manufacturers and jet users, it's not going to be all that much longer before they're mandated to buy into carbon removal schemes or buy into carbon offset schemes, and it's going to start to cost them money. And on the lighter end of aircraft, already in Europe, there's a ban that's come into force now on avgas. So avgas is essentially leaded petrol, and that is used to power about 40% of light aircraft currently flying. And it's the popular aircraft, frankly, that tend to be used by flight schools and training organizations. And avgas has been banned in Europe, meaning we can still burn it, but we can't produce it. Some countries have actually started to ban the burning of it within their borders, but currently the legislation exists that avgas we can't produce it in Europe, it's being phased out. So we can still buy it, but we have to import it from other places. The price is going up of avgas all the time, and that's only going to become more keenly felt. So kind of on the stick end, you've got the banning of certain fuels, at a time where the technology on electrification is really improving as well. So it's similar to the car industry, it's a mix.
Aviation is quite a fascinating topic, and I think it's one that people forget or it's because it's not immediately obvious. Cars are in front of you every day. You see electric cars out on the road. You don't have the same visibility necessarily with aviation. So I think it's a fascinating topic to delve into. We're going to have to make that link through to the race and really encourage people to go and watch it, because it is good fun. It really gives an insight into how this is going to develop, and I'm looking forward to a rematch of that race at some point, which I hope they do.
Yeah, you and me both. I've got ideas for there's a particularly exciting couple of new territories we're moving into where there's lots of sun, so it could be a really good one to do. Just to reference your point on the car industry, aviation is a big question to decarbonize it. On the heavy end of stuff, there's emerging potential solutions, but that's really where we're at, right? On the lighter end of stuff, and when I say lighter, I mean probably light business jet, regional size type things and below, there are already, you can see the path for where technology is taking us and electrification in that world of things. But it's easy to forget, whilst that seems like a big problem at the moment, only a few years ago we were having exactly the same conversation about the car charging industry and car industry. I remember when I entered the industry, there were people who never thought that electric cars would ever be a viable alternative. There were people I had to convince that electric cars were coming and it's a real thing and you're going to be able to do more than 50 miles. And I remember having those conversations with people who just didn't believe it, just put their head in the sand, didn't want to hear it. And so it's quite interesting how history in a way is kind of reliving itself. It is cyclical. And we haven't got all the answers in aviation, but absolutely there's some good parts of an answer.
I think that's a very good point. And I was, I worked for a major European CPO, and in 2020 when I started working with them, their entire team for the ultra rapid and ultra rapid was just fractional compared to what they had for their home charging and workplace charging, and for good reason, right? They at that time the market wasn't, the demand wasn't as great, but boy did that grew within the 2.5 years I was there. By the time I left, it was on equal footing. I think it's now the predominant part of their model because, well, there's so many more cars and there's so much more demand for that kind of transit charging, that at least for them. So yes, absolutely, you can really see it changing, and it changes really a lot faster than anyone anticipates.
It does, and there's a lot of hope for aviation. It gets a lot of stick, But there's a lot of hope for aviation and where we can get to with technology we've got today and things that are emerging. There are answers, and there will be people who say it can't be done. But I carry an adage round with me that I'll probably leave you with, which is never let those who say it can't be done get in the way of those who are doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good adage, actually, because so often that is exactly how things do get done. Because somebody has said, it's actually, I think when you say it can't be done, that's not quite right. I'm just going to carry on and do it. That is a great place to leave it. Guy, thank you so much for coming back and talking to me and giving us your insights. They're really good. I'll put a load of show notes up as well. And we'll look forward to checking in well, I would say 5 years, to reference back to your, if you come back in 5 years, my opinions might be wrong, but it might not be as long as 5 years. It might be that we need to check in before that because of the accelerated pace of adoption. So I look forward to that.
Well, hopefully with a big pipeline and all the right investors on board soon, ask me in about a year and it could be a different world.
I think it might be. Best of luck with that pipeline. I'm sure you'll smash it, but and I mean that in a good way. And great talking to you.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Toby.